Reaping the rewards of investing in agriculture. Productivity rises, malnutrition and poverty falls in several African countries. Is the success in sub-Saharan countries sustainable? Is the continent on track for food security? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Sami Zeidan. Africa no longer in the dark is the headline from a major report on agriculture. It says governments which acted early to invest in farming are seeing significant growth. Malnutrition and poverty levels are falling in some of the highest risk countries where people don't have enough to eat. Well, the Alliance for a Green Revolution, or Agra, says agricultural productivity in the past 10 years has improved lives in Ghana, Rwanda, Ethiopia and Burkina Faso. Agra says agriculture is more effective at cutting poverty than other sectors. And that's because farming is a main source of income for more than 60% of the workforce in Africa, and it continues to be a major employer. GDP has grown in countries that have been investing, we're told. Well, experts warn that Africa still has a long way to go in improving food security. They estimate $400 billion is needed over the next decade for all aspects of food production. Agriculture in Africa is threatened by low productivity because of poor roads and other transport links, as well as access to irrigation systems. The continent is also vulnerable to floods and droughts, which kill crops. Many small-scale farmers in Africa don't use chemical fertilizers. The World Bank has called for farmers to invest in irrigation, estimating that 1% of cultivated land in sub-Saharan Africa is actually watered. The World Bank says governments must help small-scale farmers by giving them access to loans and markets. Let's bring our guests into the show now. We have in Nairobi the author of the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa report, David Ameyaw. In The Hague, Kees Blokland, Managing Director of Agriterra, an organization that provides advice to farmer organizations and cooperatives in developing countries. And in Rome, Lorenzo Bello, Senior Economist at the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. Welcome to you all. If I could start with David. So some countries, David, we're told, are reaping the rewards of investing in their agricultural sector. Sounds like great news, but how representative is that success story of the continent as a whole?
I think that is the tune of our publication. For a long time, we in Africa, we look at the averages, and at times the averages, overshadow some of the success stories that we are seeing. The report have pointed out that countries that embrace the CADAP, implementation plan, and that have been able to develop their national agriculture investment plan, from 2003 to 2008, which were the first wave, have started seeing an improvement in three key factors: agricultural growth, poverty reduction, and malnutrition. The second wave of countries that embraced it and have signed the compact also are seeing a trend. Yes, when you look at
but sorry, David, isn't it, correct me if I'm wrong, I've looked into the numbers here, and it's only something like 8 to 13 countries, depending on which statistics you look at, that have actually invested 10% of their budget in agricultural development, according to what was predicted or promised in the 2003 Maputo Declaration, right? So we're not talking about anywhere near all the countries on the continent, right, David?
Yes, if you look at it from 2003 to 2014, 15 countries in one time or another have exceeded it. But if you are looking at consistency, you would think about only 5 countries. But some countries exceeded it, they fell short, or they pick it up. On average, countries that have exceeded it, yes, it's low, but some of them have gone in and out of the 10% targets.
Okay, Kees, clearly there, a lot of work still left to be done, but it's a good model. It's good news, right?
It is good news. And in fact, the 5 countries that have lived up to the promise in Maputo, we congratulate them. But of course, there is much more to do, and we see that governments are not willing to invest too much. So we are, in fact, betting on the farming sector themselves. We from Agriterra and other agri-agencies like Acodea or AFDI from France are committed to support farmers' organizations and cooperatives on the continent in order that they can take development in their hands. They can advocate to their governments in order to make them live up to that expectation, that the promise that they made in Maputo of spending 10% of the budget on agriculture, but more so to build development in the form of their own cooperatives, agro-industrialization made by farmers. And for that, there is money available. Banks have money, and investors have money, and everybody's looking for the investment possibilities. And we from the agri-agencies like Agriterra, Acodea, we help farmers' organizations to build good business plans, to improve the governance of the cooperative, the financial management, so that in the end banks have confidence in cooperatives and see what they are doing. The success of Ethiopia is for a big deal also the success of the cooperative sector. And
yeah,
the
but Case, forgive me, I mean, is it really possible to bypass or work around governments? I mean, they set the policies, they set the environment, they set the management system, right? I mean, not to take anything away from the valuable work you're doing, but I imagine that still must be a big problem.
We're not bypassing government, we're just with the farming sector convincing government that they have to bet on the farmers themselves, that they have to invest in agriculture but take farmers along, organized farmers. Those countries which have seen a swift development in general of their economies and have made a very rapid transition from an agricultural country into a modern society are countries which have heavily invested in agriculture but did it in a way that they co-created that development with their farmers, with their organized farmers.
All right.
We have the examples from Asia like Korea, Japan, and nowadays Ghana and Ethiopia are doing the same thing.
All right, Lorenzo, a lot of gains being made. Are they sustainable though?
Yes. Well, may I say that FAO is deeply convinced that agriculture and agriculture development is an avenue to get people out of extreme poverty and hunger. So, and as a matter of fact, the organization is fully committed in supporting farmers, particularly smallholders, to get better returns from their land and to increase their productivity. But I would say that I agree with the statement that averages may hide the extremes. So it is important to look at the average contribution of agriculture, but it's also important to look at who is getting the benefits. Because FAO prepared, together with the Committee on World Food Security, guidelines, I would say principles for responsible investment in agriculture. So it is important to invest in agriculture, but not all the investment is welcome. There are investments which are more welcome than others, particularly investment that respect the local communities, investment that respect the ownership of assets of smallholders, and investment that all in all provides and promotes inclusive growth. Otherwise, we may have investment, we may have increase in agricultural output, we may have all these nice things, but eventually we will not achieve a reduction or an elimination of hunger in Africa. Also in view of the fact that population is going to grow very fast, and we expect to have more than 1 billion additional people to 2050. So, and this is a challenge indeed.
That is a challenge. I'm glad you mentioned those 2 points. Let me take them back to David. I mean, are these gains, these hard-earned gains, sustainable, given some of the challenges which Lorenzo is mentioning there? Investment itself, it's a great thing, or if it's badly managed, can be a destructive force within local communities. Population growth. I mean, are these countries putting a plan together to hang on to what they've achieved?
I cannot agree with Lorenzo and the second speaker more. You know, what Africa is looking for, and for us to be able to sustain the marginal growth that we are getting and for us to maintain it, you know, we need both the public and the private sector. But there is one thing I want to emphasize. Since Maputo, attention have focused on agriculture. Government have committed to agriculture. Agriculture have come to the forefront, and for the first time, you know, government have taken ownership of the growth of agriculture. That is a first step. You need a good policy environment. You need other infrastructures that private sector may not be able to invest in. Even for the private sector to come in, you need a conducive business environment, you know, and countries like Kenya, countries like Rwanda are improving their indicators for private sectors to come in. And I think that is what this report is talking about. This report talks about 7 critical areas that we need to pay attention to in order to have sustainable, inclusive, and broad-based agriculture growth.
How much of that has actually happened then,
about.
David?
And
How much of
private
the investment environment has been sorted out in African countries to encourage sustained investment?
You will see that in 1995 to 2003, the average investment in agriculture, you know, taking the country average, was 128.55 million. In 2008 to 2014, it has risen to 219.62 million. That is the average investment.
Okay, hold on to that thought. Hold on to that thought. You made a good point there with the average. Let me take the average back to someone I know doesn't like averages as much as you do, David. Lorenzo, are these averages perhaps masking some of the challenges that remain in Africa? We often talk about the problems of mismanagement and corruption in African countries.
FAO, WFP and the FAD prepared a report last year, which is Achieving Zero Hunger, the critical role of investment in social protection and agriculture. So because we are aware of the fact that there are some people that require immediate protection. They require immediate availability of income to buy food. They say hungry people don't need to wait until the economic systems develop to get their food. They need food now. So social protection is a key factor that governments have to take care of. But at the same time, of course, it may not be sustainable in the long run. So we need
my
also
question,
to invest
Lorenzo,
in
is are governments
activities.
taking care of that in general? Can you generalize across the board and say overall governments are taking care of that?
Our report has been well received by our member countries. All the governments in Africa are aware of the need to invest in social protection and agriculture. And of course, we are an international organization. We can't force governments to do things, but we partner with our member countries and we promote good investment and inclusive investment in agriculture as a device to relieve people and to get them out of extreme hunger
All right, I can see
and poverty.
Case has something.
May I say that you mentioned, sorry to say, but you mentioned one of the issues, which is corruption. Corruption is a signal of bad governance, bad institutions. And I may mention also the work done by the Economic Commission for Africa in 2014. They estimated that 50 billion of income leave Africa through illicit financial flows.
Okay,
this
good.
50 billion is more than half of the income needed to get people out of extreme poverty.
Let's transition to Case, because I could see you wanted to come in on that point. Go ahead, Case.
Well, it's not so much about corruption, but it's about governments in general. They are not going to guarantee that the people have food enough. In the end, it's a solid economy and people who have employment. Once everybody has employment and an income, they will have food. I've never seen anybody with a decent job without food. So the key question is, how do you get economic development in a way that the transition takes place from agriculture, where now massively people are in without very much perspectives. It's a kind of unemployment subsidy. Therefore, they are in agriculture. They have to go out of agriculture. Most of them have to go out of agriculture and move into other sectors of the economy, industry and services. And in the end, that transition is very delicate, because in that transition, you get a lot of imbalances. And therefore, that transition is very key. And you can only do it if you do it with the help of organized farmers. And that's our point. And that we bring in top-notch experts to work on that, to work on proposals to government on how to make the transition, to work with cooperatives to make them bankable, to work with farmers' organizations in order to make them bring good services to the members and become good entrepreneurs. And that's in the end what happened, because it's not governments who will feed the world, it will be farmers who feed the world.
All right, I'm going to come back to you on that point.
I fully agree with what you said.
Let me give David a chance.
Can I come in here?
Yeah, let me give David a chance. Go ahead.
Yes, I agree with Case very well, and that is how we define agricultural transformation. We said that agricultural transformation happens when majority of Africa's smallholder farmers have moved from subsistence level farm-centered approach of farming to more of commercial, productive, and highly growth method, which most of them are going to move to on-farm activities. Nobody in Africa is saying that government have to do everything, but government have to create the incentive. Two, corruption is not, Africa doesn't have the sole ownership of corruption. Corruption is everywhere, Asia, America, Latin America, everywhere there is corruption. But I come back to the case, what Case is saying, that if we are able to spur economic growth, that citizens, farmers, youth on this continent are able to take off farm activities, they will be able to improve their livelihood. So yes, all those problems are there, and that is why this year report we're saying that we are not overlooking those problems. But amidst all these problems, there have been a growth, and we have to look at what have incentivized those growths and how do we work on it to be able to sustain and improve the African continent. Everybody, it's easy for everybody to tag Africa
sorry to say,
with all those negativity.
All right,
but
let's give Lorenzo a chance.
Are happening in Africa,
he wants to comment on that.
We shouldn't overlook
I get your point, David. Let's see the glass as half full rather than half empty. Go ahead, Lorenzo.
Yeah, I wanted just to intervene to specify something. You know, now you have a smallholder. The assets of this smallholder is a plot. Okay, it's a small plot, fine, but he has an asset. The problem is to manage a transition in such a way that once he's no longer in agriculture, he still has some assets to gain his life, to produce income. You know, so in this transition, people who have assets have not to lose them. So, and this is an institutional problem. This is we need governments with a vision, and we need governments with vision to protect the assets of poor people. You know, particularly to transform these assets from their plot in something else that is going to be useful in the new economic setup of Africa. So I think about education, for instance. Exactly what I think about human capital. I think about this kind of opportunities that smallholders, all in all, must have if a transition to an inclusive economic systems have
All right, so there's some role case for the government. You said governments don't feed the world, the farmers will. Maybe true, but there is some role for governments, isn't there? I mean, if they're going to connect them to markets, if they're going to build irrigation systems, there's actually a lot of work, is there not, to be done by governments if we're going to transform that. What is it? Only 7% of Africa's arable land is irrigated. There's a lot of work that governments need to do to lay an infrastructure, right?
6%.
Case?
You know, and I take it from Lorenzo.
It's a question if governments are going to do that. And I fully agree with Lorenzo. It's about assets that have to be preserved in the transition. But therefore, exactly, governments should work more closely with farmers' organizations, with organized farmers and cooperatives in order to make that transition, because those are the people who have the assets. They are improving their assets. We bring in all that expertise from top-notch companies all over the world who cooperative companies who help them to re-engineer their cooperative and build them for the future. And in that way, because they are actively involved, participating in the development and building together with governments and other stakeholders the new economy, in that way they can preserve their assets and make them bigger. The thing is that we bet a lot on governments and think that they can do those things, but they need to work closely with the people and with the organized people, and that's our point.
When you work case with organized people, what do you find is holding the money back, so to speak? Because one of the biggest challenges...
Can I come in here?
All right, go ahead, David. I'll come to case in a moment then.
Yes, I want to come in here. You know, that is at times, you know, the way people look at African issues and think that one size fits all. If you look at the trends in Africa, you will see that a lot of African investors who are not members of cooperative organizations are entering into agriculture. So many young people are investing in African agriculture. We have done so many programs. Agra have done so many programs where we started with only a few seed companies in Africa, and now we have Africa private sector, private entrepreneurs who have started their seed companies from zero. They are not members of
David, hang on. If that's true, then why is finance, David? Why is finance still considered? Is it not the biggest challenge to small farmers and agro businesses?
What we are saying is that as productivity, as land and labor productivity goes up, agriculture is not only production. Agriculture starts from R&D to distribution of input, to land production, to post-harvest handling, to marketing, to processing, right down to the consumer table. So if you go to, let's say, a cooperative organization that is doing only production, you need another cooperative organization to maybe take care of the marketing. You need somebody to take care of
I can see Cases shaking his head in disagreement. David, let's give him a chance to come in on this.
I think the cooperative movement also in Africa is very active in building industries, plants to process agricultural produce. They bring employment to rural areas. I've seen cooperatives in a few years create 400 new places of employment nearby the villages where farmers are working, and offering an opportunity for young people to go and work and stay in rural areas. And that's the important, because a farmer would never build a plant near the capital. He will build it near his land in order to have an outlet for his production and have it processed rapidly, and it brings employment for his kids. And in that way, when you involve farmers and farmers' organizations in designing the development path, it will improve your development. And that's not a matter of belief. It's not a matter of that we think it should be. Right. It's a matter of statistics. When you look to countries who are highly developed, they all have an important cooperative sector.
On that? Sorry.
Okay, I think we've got 20 seconds left, Lorenzo. I'll give you 20 seconds for a final thought before we have to wrap this up.
Just to say that it is important that to find the right institutions to produce income which is then distributed and not concentrated. You know?
Right.
Africa is probably going to stay a continent which is a food deficit continent for the next years to come due to the population growth. You know? So there is a market for food, there is a need for producing food, but at the same time there is a need for income to also to import food. So economic growth has to go together with income distribution, otherwise we will never get out of hunger and poverty.
Let's leave it there on the hope of getting out of hunger and poverty. Thank you very much, gentlemen. I'm afraid we are out of time. Apologies to everyone, our guests, David Ameyaw, Case Blockland and Lorenzo Bellu. And thank you too for watching. You can see the show again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com, or for further discussion, head over to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle there is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Sami Zeidan, and the whole team here, for now, it's goodbye.